So today we're going to be talking about this idea of eugenics. How many have heard or know what the word means? Okay. So we're going to talk about that. And the quotation at the bottom is, I think, very pertinent. The serpent said to the woman, "For God knows that when you eat from it, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God." So I think humanity, in many ways, especially in the people who are leaders of our country and other countries, they've sought to be like God over the people that they rule. And as Pastor Rob have said, as the oligarchs and the people who are tyrants and the kings and all of that, that's the system that has ruled the world. And United States, where we have we the people, that's a very different idea. So let me go on to the next one. Basically, when people say they disagree with the Bible, it's saying that the Bible contradicts itself. Well, that's really more that it contradicts them. So their ideas are not being, found in the Bible. So they're going to make their own Bible, and that's what's happened today. So as always, Insight, we exalt Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, teach the Bible as best that we can, equip the saints so that you'll have this knowledge, and then we expect you to go tell the world. And so that's what we want to do. So I wanted to start with this. Ideas have consequences. We have to really say that when we see an idea, and today obviously idea is evolution, when that concept is studied and taken to its full bloom, it leads to other things. It's just a seed that you plant. It just doesn't stay as a seed. If it ripens and it matures into a plant, then it has many facets that don't exactly look like what the founder of that idea thought, but it blossoms into all of the things that are built within it when it's put forward. So a lot of people, evolutionists, say that Darwinism and religion are totally different. They're just you have science, which they call Darwinism, you have faith, which you call religion, and those are poles apart. You'll see during this talk that it's not true. And also a lot of compromising church people, Catholics, and some evangelicals that believe the Bible, they want to cram evolution somehow into the Bible and make it fit because they feel, oh, well, we don't have faith in the Bible, so when it tells us God created the world in 6 days, we don't believe that. We don't believe all the genealogies that are in Genesis. We don't believe the genealogy of Jesus and Luke that goes back to Adam and Eve. We believe that there were people, primates and people evolving into humans, and that just is not biblical. And you can't put it in there without corrupting the Bible, adding to it. So we have we can use all of these events that I'm going to show you to link to show. If you have an idea that blesses people and people flourish and they become healthier and they live longer and they work together better, that's probably a godly idea. If you have an idea that takes people away from God, that causes violence, that causes murder, death, and destruction, that's probably not something from God. So I put up this slide of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He was talking about, obviously, Nazi Germany. Silence in the face of evil is evil itself. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak, and not to act is to act. So when people are telling you, oh, okay, park your Christianity at the door, don't bring that in here, we don't want to deal with that, you have to push back. If we're silent, we're useless. So this is one of my favorite slides. You know, the word science means the quest for knowledge. It doesn't mean knowledge. A lot of dictionaries define it as knowledge. No, we know the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, and that's what I hold in my heart. Science is a quest for knowledge, and we can talk about the early scientists who believed that the Earth was the center of the solar system and the sun revolved around the earth, and all of the ancient things that over time we found out are not true as we got more in tune with what God made, how God made the universe. But I like the quote on the right. The greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance, it's the illusion of knowledge. And I think that is the key to what we're talking about today. If the scientists and the people that go on the television, the talking heads on the internet and everything, they're talking all of these ideas and theories and everything. It's the illusion of knowledge. And the Bible says in end times, you know, people be willfully ignorant. And, you know, they have a lot of letters after their name, you know, degrees and everything. That doesn't mean zip. It really doesn't. So it's what's in your heart and how you perceive. If you're a godly person and you understand God, you have more knowledge than Stephen Hawking's when he was alive. So being an engineer and a scientist, I gave a little flow chart here. So let's see if I push the right button here. Maybe that one. Okay, so we start in ancient times. Obviously, racism and atheism have been with us since ancient times. But when we came along and evolution was proposed in the 1850s, actually Charles Darwin and another person both had that same theory and published it about the same time, but Darwin was the one that was pushed by other people, so that's what we live with. But you can see, now we look at what the branches are. So first of all, evolution is corrupted science. You know, they teach evolution in the schools. They don't teach creation. They teach that one animal can change from one kind of animal, from a fish to a frog to a lizard to a bunny rabbit to a chimpanzee to us. So that's corrupted science. Then there's this term eugenics, which we'll talk about in depth, and that's essentially if you can breed animals to have them become more robust. If you breed dogs, you want a big dog to be your guard dog, then you get a big nasty dog. And if you want something you can put in your purse that you can carry around to the grocery store, you breed a little tiny yappy dog. So if you can do that with dogs, why can't you do it with humans, you know? And if you use the logic, so you have to think like they think, okay, I did it with dogs, and then I did it with horses, and I did it with pigeons, so now I can do it with humans. So we just have to eliminate those humans we don't like, and we'll have the ones that we do like have lots of children. So that's eugenics. And then the racism comes along, and actually evolution is feeding that scientific racism. There should be an arrow here going up to scientific racism, and then eugenics spawned Nazism. You can see exactly how the Aryan race could be an evolution from eugenics, and then we have white supremacy. Guess we still have Nazis, but now the new term is white supremacists. Yeah.
Could you explain scientific racism?
Explain what?
Scientific racism.
Scientific racism is, okay, so racism is just, okay, well, I hate you because of your race. But if you do scientific racism, that means you evolved. I'll get to it in just a second, but the evolution of humans, if you think about evolution, okay, so then some human tribes in a country, maybe Africa or Asia or something, evolved after the tribe that went to the northern part and the Aryans, so they're more evolved. They're a species of human being that is more evolved. And if you think of humans just because of the color of your skin or some feature of your face or your body as being different, then it's easy. Okay, well, you're different than me. I'm more evolved, or I'm taller. I have traits that make me more desirable than other people. But just hang in there. It's coming. And then the final one is communism up there. And I'll give some examples to all of that. How much time do I have?
So 10, 20?
20 minutes?
10, 20.
10 to 20. 15?
20.
Okay. We'll zip through here. So here's Charles Darwin. He lived in the 1800s. He published his book in the famous one on the origin of the species, but they always say this title of the book is Origin of the Species, but you have to continue. His book, actually, I've blown it up so you can read it. That's the first page, of natural selection or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. They don't really put that second part there, do they? And then he subsequently, sometime later, he wrote The Descent of Man. And that was the descent of man and selection in relation to sex. So it had the idea that there were races that were favored. Okay, but he, like all of he wasn't necessarily, his family had some people who worked against slavery. So I'm not trying to make him into the devil, but I'm saying that his idea was the one that spawned a lot of misery that we have seen. And on the left is his notebook page, and that's the tree of life. That's the only picture that he had in his notes that he had before he wrote the book. But on people that followed along, if you look on the right-hand side, you see these pictures, and there's the Grecian face of a statue, and then you see somebody probably from Africa below him, and then you see a depiction of a primate, an ape. And the people have actually, the skull of the African gentleman looks very, very close to the skull of the statue on top. They've actually elongated the jaw. He doesn't look anything like that. So people seized on this idea. Okay, so the skin color and that is different, so we're going to do all of these frauds. And I have 20-minute presentation on all of the frauds that have been committed, but that's an example. Okay, so here's like Darwin's friends and family. The top gentleman, that's his grandfather, who was a physician, Erasmus Darwin. He actually believed in evolution before Charles was a gleam in his parents' eye. He was a doctor and very influential and wrote poetry in that, but he did believe in evolution. And Charles Lyell is another. He's a lawyer that turned into a geologist, and he was one of the ones that was pushing that the Earth was millions of years. Up to the 1800s, middle 1800s, there were people that were saying, even in Greek time, ancient Greek times, that it was not 6,000 years old like the Bible says, but they were pushing for longer. But he was the one that Darwin, actually Charles, read. And then here's his cousin, Sir Francis Galton. He's the one that originated eugenics, the concept of eugenics. And then, of course, Charles had some children, and so this fellow, Leonard, and then Horace, Francis, and George, they all were part of the eugenics activity. So Darwin's children, his male children, were all very forceful in pushing eugenics. And of course, then there's Huxley, who is called Darwin's bulldog because he was a politician and he pushed evolution heavily in schools and in Europe and England especially. And then Henkel, this is a fellow who was a doctor, and he was pushing the evolutionary ideas in Germany. And he actually fraudulently drew pictures of fetuses that made humans look like dogs and fish to say, oh, if you're a fetus, then you look the same. And so there's the book. I've outlined a few chapters there. So Darwinism has really been weaponized by these followers. I won't go through it. I mentioned them briefly, but they used that idea. They seized on that idea to push. And the reason, let me go back. The reason that they did that is when you're saying, okay, well, we want to say these group of people are inferior. Somebody will say, why? And you say, well, I don't like them. They don't look like we do. That doesn't carry much weight. But if you can say, oh, scientifically we've studied this and we've found that they're inferior to us, so we can do these things, awful things to them, then it's rational, but they're using that to push their agenda. I've done something. Can you advance it?
What slide are you at?
I pushed the wrong button somewhere.
Go back
No,
the other way.
we'll just go through it quickly if you can advance it.
Is that where you want to be?
So the next couple of slides, I'll explain what they are as we're trying to get that fixed. The next couple of slides actually tell how evolution works. So evolution needs some kind of mysterious way for life to first start. So everybody's theory is the Earth was a molten rock and was thousands of degrees, so nothing could have been formed on Earth in the evolutionary standpoint from the beginning. So it had to occur from non-life. And so what they saw in the 1700s and 1800s was if you have maybe a piece of fish or you have a piece of meat or some sort of a carcass of an animal, that you see that there the one day and then the next day you come back, it's covered with flies and maybe worms or whatever. So they thought life could be spontaneously formed, that life was just popping up here and there, just under the right circumstances. You couldn't keep life from forming. And so then the next stage, okay, you've got life, then life has to change from one thing to another, and they saw changes when two dogs mate or two cats mate, that the offspring look a little different than the parents, but that is just an appearance. It's still a cat, it's still a dog, it's still a horse. So, but they extrapolated that and say, okay, so then we have natural selection. So that's survival of the fittest. We got all of these organisms. Some are weaker, some are stronger. So it makes a lot of sense.
Try to advance it, Bobby.
No. So it makes a lot of sense to say that the strong survive and the weak perish, and then over long lengths of time, if you extrapolate this in your mind, then you have evolution. Then you have a single cell organism changing into a human being, and cats and dogs. Everything we see today, since we all had the same common starting point, every animal and creature we see today is evolved just the same as we've had the same amount of time, because we started with a single first living creature. Well, as time passed, then we discovered DNA. We discovered that life doesn't spontaneously happen. If you put a mesh over the top of the rotting meat, then the flies can't lay eggs in it, so there's no life. And so they established something called neo-Darwinism. So neo-Darwinism has to do with, you take the fact that DNA, the first life, no one has any explanation for that, but they say, oh, it came from outer space, or maybe it developed under the sea in these hot sea vents or whatever. There's hundreds of different causes. So something miraculous happens, and then we have mutations. So animal will have a mutation, a DNA change, and then that changes. It might have a new limb. It might develop a tail where it didn't have a tail, etc. So then they continued to embrace natural selection, and then finally you get to what you see today. So that's neo-Darwinism. And so when that was established, it still didn't really explain everything, because mutations are 99.999% deleterious and only 0.001. There's some cases like you say, well, antibiotic resistant bacteria. So there's a bacteria that develops immunity to antibiotics. So that's a better bacteria. That's a super bug. Oh, there, okay. Okay, so this is Darwinism. There's spontaneous generation. The animals are stretching their necks, so they go from horse-like things to giraffes, and then they're killing each other. That's the natural selection. So those two things don't work, so you go over to neo-Darwinism. So now they have life created by lightning and mud or something. Then the DNA has mistakes, and then natural selection, and that's where we are today. So when they're teaching that, you know, if you're a kid in school, you're thinking, I'm just, you know, I came from that lightning bolt centuries ago. You know, there are a bunch of mistakes, and we know that natural selection, survival of the fittest, is the way you get better. So the way I can make the world better is to eliminate the people that are inferior. And so that's the mindset of some of these school shooters. In fact, they'll wear T-shirts or have on their Facebook pages that they're the natural selector. Okay, then you come to social Darwinism. So if you apply the science of Darwinism, let's apply it to people, and that's one of the most frightening thing that's been proposed is having the social Darwinism, and that you say then the weak must perish and the strong must rule or survive. And essentially, I think this whole thing can be summarized that science has tried to replace God. So instead of saying, you know, we trust God, what you hear today from the television and the internet and from the speakers that come to campuses and things like that, is science is God. That can explain everything. You know, the universe comes from nothing, and they stand there and argue and write mathematical equations and everything that you can have something come from nothing, which is absurd. You call that science. And then progressivism, that's held that science would essentially wrest all of the cosmological mysteries away from the churches, and science itself would be that which directs society. So the answer to all mankind's problem is science, not God. So if you could play that video, that Dinesh D'Souza video, we can get to a point where we can kind of wrap up.
Now, who are the progressives? The progressives were a group on the left that emerged in the early part of the 20th century, about 100 years ago. And their ideological commitment was to something called social Darwinism. Social Darwinism. Social Darwinism is simply the idea that nature is a struggle for survival, and that includes human nature, and that just as in nature, the weak, the ones that can't defend themselves, the disposable creatures get preyed upon, die of starvation or hunger, get, you may say, wiped out by the course of nature, so too there are humans who are worthless, disposable, unfit, and it's our job to figure out a way to get rid of these people. If they are here, we have to figure out a way to kill them. But if they're not here, it's even better if you can prevent them from being born in the first place. Now, this sounds like an atrocious, outrageous Nazi scheme, but actually the Nazis never came up with it. The scheme was actually developed in the United States. Now, the inventor of eugenics, the word simply means better born, but the idea of eugenics is to promote the survival of the fit and to promote the elimination or extermination of the unfit. This idea was developed by progressives in the United States long before it was taken up later by the Nazis.
So anyway, so you see that. I mean, it's chilling. I mean, when he said, better yet, if the people aren't born, that's the time to kill the ones. And we know that Margaret Sanger, she wrote in her books of her racism and her hatred towards certain groups of people, and set up the Planned Parenthood organizations in the areas where the poor people lived. They're not in Beverly Hills. They're not in North Ranch. They're not in Simi Valley. They're in downtown Los Angeles and in the Watts and those areas. So it is a very focused activity on that scene. And as Rob has said, we've killed Canada. I have a slide. If you can go about halfway down, just advance it. Okay. Okay, so eugenics and Nazism, it's pretty easy to see. If you're trying to say the well-born, then that, in their mind, that means the Aryans. They're the white Nordic descendants. And the people, Hitler was a very, very devoted believer in evolution and in eugenics. And because eugenics was in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And the death toll of innocent people, I'm not saying these are soldiers, these are not soldiers. This is the death, 21 million people of non-combatants. These were just the collateral damage from the war that went on, Second World War, in Germany. This doesn't count the Pacific War. And you can see the USSR had over 12 million people killed that were, again, innocent non-combatants compared. And then obviously the Jews and the Gypsies and the Slavs, anybody who didn't fit the mold of an Aryan. Darwinism and communism, you don't really hear that link. The socialists and communists are kind of the darlings of the press now, and they talk lovingly about Karl Marx and some of these people that are affiliated with Darwinism. But it struck me when I was reading the book and doing some additional research about the lives of these people that are the names and faces of communism before they went to the university, and then after they went to the university. So Karl Marx, the founder of communism, did tremendous pioneering work on communism. He was a Jew. He came from Jewish ethnicity, but he then became a baptized Lutheran and had written a letter of his love for Jesus Christ when he was young. However, he went to university, fell for atheism and materialism, and fell for evolution, and then became the founder of communism. Then here's sort of the rogues gallery, Friedrich Engels, about the same time, Marx and Engels, if you remember your history books. He was raised in a religious family and fell in love with Darwinism and called it absolutely splendid. Lenin, Vladimir Lenin, raised as a Bible-believing parents, and in his words was fascinated with the ideas of Charles Darwin. Trotsky, Leon, he was converted from Orthodox Judaism to communism through Darwinism, and then Joseph Stalin, who killed millions and millions and millions of his own people, studied to be a priest after getting swept away by Darwinism and became a communist. And then in the East, Mao Zedong was raised by a devout religious Buddhist mother, and then became enamored with Darwinism and became a revolutionary. In fact, he said he came to see Darwin as the founder of the Chinese scientific socialism. So you can see what the effect. I say ideas have consequences. These are people who were raised in a family. Maybe they were a very pious family, Orthodox Jews, Buddhists, Christians, all non-violent. And then they get to school and then they are taught Darwinism and evolution. And this is the result. And there's the fruit. 100 million people killed. It's a conservative estimate. Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to do that to you. So Soviet Union, Cambodia, Pol Pot, North Korea, all of the dictators, Africa, Afghanistan, Vietnam, Latin America. So let me jump ahead here. So what is, as Dinesh D'Souza was saying or hinting at there, abortion and population control are the eugenics of the 21st century. We don't call it eugenics anymore. We call it population control. We call it reproductive health. We call it a woman's choice. We have names for things that are tragedies of monumental proportion. And in the United States, at least 56 million unborn children have been killed since it was legalized in 1973. And I don't think you can see that, but there's a list of cities. I looked up on the Wikipedia the population of different cities. And if you wiped out all of these cities, Los Angeles, New York City, Chicago, Houston, Philadelphia, Phoenix, San Antonio, San Diego, Dallas, on and on, San Jose, going further, Portland, Las Vegas, Milwaukee, Fresno, Sacramento, keep going down, Santa Ana, St. Louis, they're all gone. If there was a bomb, if there was an attack on the United States, and all of these cities were destroyed with weapons of mass destruction, and we instantly lost 56 million lives, what would we think? But it's the frog in the pot of water. The heat is turned up, and slowly we've become immune to all of this death and destruction. And California is such a great state. Governor Brown in 2013 signed the bill AB 154, and it allows a nurse practitioner, a certified nurse midwife, or a physician's assistant to perform a suction aspirated abortion on women in the first trimester. But if you have an animal that needs to have an abortion because of something happening in its body, then the animal, it says in the law, the procedure must be carried out by a licensed veterinary surgeon. So in California, we value animals more than we value humans. LGBT movement, man plus man and woman plus woman cannot have children. So it's going against Genesis 1:28. Then God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and govern it." And down at the bottom, with regard to marriage, when the Pharisees were attacking Jesus, he says, he answered, "Have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female?" So they were no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let not man separate. We hear that in the...
You mean there's only two genders?
Hmm?
You mean there's only two genders?
It's binary. You need to close that. Yeah. And the birth rate, let's look at what the effects are. The birth rate is falling. 2018, it's the lowest number of births in 32 years. The U.S. fertility rate is at a record low. Okay, and since 1986, the U.S. has seen so few babies born that the ongoing slump, 2018, was the fourth consecutive year of birth declines. and I've got a plot. So that's the essentially like the birth rate, and this is from the Federal Reserve Bank. So they're planning. We're doing economic planning based on the fact that the population has lower and lower fertility. And how about marriage? This one hit me between the eyes. 18-year-old and older, percentage of adult age 18 and older who are married. In 60, it was 72. Today, it's hovering at 50%, and you can just look at that line. How many people, that's 56 years. In 56 more years, is it going to drop another 22%? Are we going to be at 28% of the population is married? So it's destruction of the family. You know, in the end, two things. The people are being taught they are their own ruler. They're their own God. What they believe is true. What everybody else says that threatens them, they can go to a safe space or call a person a hate speech person. We need political correct language. So am I blaming all of the society's problems on evolution? No. I'm blaming the problems with society basically on the rejection of God. That's the problem. And it's destroying our families, it's destroying our humanity, and it's killing people. But I am blaming evolution because it's given an easy out. Because if you're talking to somebody and you're trying to reason with them, you know, come let us reason together, and we're talking about Christianity and all of the things it offers, that the ones that I've dealt with that are really hardcore, they'll always say, oh, evolution, it proves the Bible is wrong, you know, and just walk away from that. So my answer is, to God be the glory. You know, we have to reach out to our opportunities that we meet every day. Our family members, maybe not all of our family members are Christian. Maybe not all of our neighbors are Christians. The people at work, if you do it, sometimes it's heavily prohibited that you talk about Christianity at work, but you can have a little Bible study after work or during lunch hour. You invite people if you want to come study the Bible and eat lunch in my office or wherever in the break room in the corner. You can do that. And we just have to reach out to people and touch their hearts. And I thank you so much for listening. I'm sorry I pushed the wrong button there, but I hope the message got through. We really need to speak out and be bold for Jesus Christ. Thank you.